Hey guys, Rambo here. Today we'll be taking a look at 10 different glitches that were in Dead Ops Arcade 3. Most of these exploits were patched out of the game, but maybe a couple of them still work to some degree or another. Anyways, timestamps will be in the description below. Let's get right into it. Number 1. Lawnmower Arena. The Lawnmower Arena, also known as Mama's House, also known as a Plants vs. Zombies homage, certainly had its fair share of exploits throughout time. This arena, being the only one with spring pads, was a large contributor to this problem, as players were able to use the jump pads to access various out-of-bounds areas, such as this one here that let you get on top of this structure, and there was also another glitch where you could take the spring pad and then use a speed boost mid-air in order to get on top of the roof. The downsides to glitches like these ones are that in later playthroughs of arenas, there are special enemies that appear like the Megaton, which can target you with their spit or blue orb attacks, even if you're in a higher elevation. So glitches like these ones weren't too useful, but definitely offered the player an advantage in the earlier rounds. Number 2. Mech God Mode in the War Store. This God Mode glitch was one of the first major exploits in the game and was a large contributor to the leaderboards being reset just 1 month into the game's lifecycle. This glitch required discovering the War Store bonus room, which is a random encounter, so back then some people would just never hit the bonus room in their particular match. But if you were lucky enough to get this bonus room, you would have to enter one of the mech vehicles over on this side, and then sort of angle it against the nearby mech, and then spam your analogs a bunch during the round transition screen. Actually, I'm not exactly sure how you were able to reproduce this glitch back then, as there was a lot of baloney surrounding it, but if you did it correctly, you would get sent to this limbo area, and whenever you exited the vehicle, you would then return to the normal arena and sometimes have God mode for the remainder of the match, which of course prevented enemies from killing you. Eventually this glitch was patched, and with the patches, it kind of broke the War Store for a bit of time, as most players would be kicked from their vehicles during the round transition screen, but eventually that was addressed as well. Number 3. Unlimited keys and loot from underbosses. Many bosses in the wild can be despawned if they venture off too far from their original spawn point. But once upon a time, whenever many bosses despawned, they would drop loot as if they were killed. So players were able to repeatedly despawn some of these enemies in order to get unlimited loot. One player spent several hours doing this back in the day, allowing him to be the first player to discover the original reward for maxing out your 9x score multiplier, which at the time was a random third fate. The reason why this respawning loot glitch was so useful at the time was because many bosses had a chance at dropping a key as one of their loot rewards. So you could essentially get 9 keys from despawning them over and over. So how was this patched? When many bosses despawn now, they usually don't drop loot. Although in some cases they still drop their loot when you enter a bonus room, but that can only be done a limited number of times, in addition to their loot not being as valuable as it once was. Number 4. Round 60 wild shortcut with the Dune buggy. I previously made a video on this glitch, but it's certainly worth repeating. In the wild, you would have to enter a dune buggy, then have it be squashed by the interactable lift either near the beginning area of the wild or by the kaboom room. It was easier to accomplish on co-op with the help of teammates, but it technically was possible to do on solo as well, if you had 2 cars near you and were playing the FPS playlist. Reproducing this glitch was often difficult to do, as usually your car would get stuck underneath the map, requiring your teammates to warp you to a bonus area, and then you would have to try the trick again. If you fell underneath the map on solo, well, sadly you would be chalked. Anyways, the goal of this glitch was to have your car launch into the sky, at which point you would then exit the vehicle and use speed boosts towards the round 60 wild area, allowing you to collect all the extra loot and score up there. Eventually this glitch was patched, as nowadays, if you drive the dune buggy near the lifts, it will cause your car to explode. However, you are still able to drive the dune buggy near the lift on the volcano, so do with that information as you will. Though that of course requires opening up a couple of doors that you normally wouldn't bother with. Number 5. Various invincibility spots. I don't even know if these invincibility glitches were in the game from the very start of the UA3, or if they just appeared out of the blue in a random update, but the first time I noticed one of them was during a random livestream of mine. I played through the wild for fun and was ready to quit afterwards, so I was just losing lives on purpose during the Gladiator arena, trying to get some extra XP, yada yada. Except, small problem. I accidentally discovered that if you stood right over here, the zombies would eventually stop targeting you. I thought it was a bit odd, but didn't think too much of it. Then I received a YouTube comment a day or two later where someone shared a similar glitch that they found on the jungle arena. I tried it out, and lo and behold, if you hid in the tree trunk on jungle, the zombies couldn't hit you. At this point, I figured many of the other arenas shared similar exploits. So after some research into the dark alleyways of the community, along with some testing of my own, I managed to replicate similar exploits on arenas like Bloodpool, Werewolf, Dead Drop, Throne Room, and a few others. Eventually these spots were patched out of the game, but who truly knows? Maybe there's still a couple secret spots you can find in some obscure corner of the map. Number 6. Duping loot, fates, and arcades. Duping. One of my favorite glitches in DOA history. This trick wasn't discovered until really late into the game's lifecycle, so kinda like the previous glitch. So I'm not sure if it was always in the game from the start, but one day a player came to my Twitch chat and made an acute observation that if you spammed the interact button near an item such as a chest, it would produce extra loot from that item, with the trick being much easier to replicate if you had the tap to interact setting enabled. You would know that you did the glitch successfully whenever you heard the sound effect for opening an item play twice. For treasure chests, it only produced slightly more gold than you would typically receive, an amount that you probably wouldn't even notice if you did the trick by accident. But a cool thing about opening key chests was that there was a small chance that you would get not just one key return, but 2 keys from a loot pile. This duping also worked well with these armory boxes that could be found in dungeons and the abandoned temple, as you would double the amount of armory that you would typically receive. This trick also applied to other items like the weapon box, small copper chests, and even the present box in Weston's Trading Post, where you could actually triple the amount of extra lives awarded from the box. So 6 lives instead of just 2. Clearly, this duping was a bit broken and was promptly fixed. A similar duping trick also worked on other items such as the arcade machine in the wild. Having 2 players interact with the arcade at the same time allowed 2 levels to be loaded in at once. So you can hypothetically get this Blue Skies arcade level with 2 keys in it, or the more common outcome would be that you had 1 level loaded, took a death, then respawned in a totally different slideways area. So you would essentially be able to collect loot from 2 different levels, and your camera would also sometimes get a bit messed up too. Having 2 players interact with an item also worked with fate stones in deadly dungeons. So having multiple players grab the stone at the same time would allow that fate to be distributed to more than one player. 2 birds with 1 stone. Quite literally. These duping exploits were only known by a small portion of the community for a few weeks, until they were eventually patched out of the game as part of one of the final updates in October 2021. Number 7. Gladiator axe Insta-Killing bosses. When the game first released, the Mamaback would instantly die whenever she came into contact with an axe from a Gladiator enemy. Once people knew about this, they would purposely not shoot these Gladiator enemies and try to line them up with the Mamaback. Usually easier said than done. Then there were also people who just encountered this glitch by pure luck and didn't even know what happened.
10 seconds.
Defeat the Mamaback, it just said. We just did it. Mamaback defeated!
What?
What?
Get on me!
What?
Resident Evil.
No way!
This glitch was patched out of the game fairly quickly, but sadly, or gladly for some, there is actually a similar glitch in the game to this date, but it requires getting lucky with a certain item pickup spawning in at precisely the right time. And that's all I'll say on that matter. Number 8. Dungeon settings in normal rounds. The following glitch was able to be replicated a few different ways, but the easiest method of doing it back in the day was to grab a doom buggy in the wild and then drive through a mech vehicle. Whenever you did this, the mech would be spiritually inhabited by the doom buggy, and your player would sort of be in a limbo state with no color. During the next 40 seconds, or the duration of the mech vehicle, you would then have to drop into a nearby deadly dungeon. Whenever you did this, the game would teleport you back to the location of your mech, while applying dungeon settings to the entire wild area. If you tried entering other dungeons, they would unfortunately be empty, which would be fixed by traveling to the edge of the abyss and then dropping off. However, if you didn't enter a second dungeon, and instead took a teleporter while dungeon settings were active, you would then have a minimap radar in top-down mode. Not too shabby, but one major downside to this glitch was that you couldn't use the extra high camera view, which was a bit of a game changer. Another anomaly of this glitch is that certain items that appear in deadly dungeons, such as lanterns and red health potions, were possible items that could spawn in during the normal rounds. This glitch would correct itself if you managed to have a random encounter with a cavernous cellar bonus area. As for the patch related to this glitch, the mech no longer bugs out if you drive into it with a doom buggy, although the minimap and limited camera options in top-down can still be obtained via other methods. Number 9. Island Exploits. The old island arena on DOA has been a staple to the series since the dawn of time. However, this iteration of the island had a few exploits for the first few months of the game's release. One of the glitches was over here by the water area. Standing in the correct spot would make it to where zombies would pile up on the other side. This glitch was eventually addressed through the addition of some debris in the water, which prevented the player from swimming to that specific spot. However, you could still do the glitch to some degree post-patch, though nowhere near as successfully. Another glitch on this arena was related to the turtles that appear. Good old Tortuga caused a lot of issues. Depending on the round that you were on, the turtle would be located in a different part of the map. So if you were on the second round of island, then there would be a turtle in the top left water area. Players then would be able to stand on top of the turtle, and while it wasn't a total god mode spot, it was somewhat of a pile-up that allowed players to camp very easily in that corner of the map. These turtles were eventually removed from post-round 64 playthroughs of the island arena, although camping in that corner is still as piss easy as when I stood on top of old Tortuga. Number 10. Blightfather Path Shortcuts. In the earlier days of DOA 3, you would have to make an important decision in the wild. Were you going to spend an extra key opening up towards the Blightfather Path in hopes of some key spawns and other loot? Or were you going to opt for the safer path of spending just one key with the store going north? Well, what if you could have the best of both worlds? Back in the day, a player who I carried in one of my open lobbies messaged me on Twitch and shared a trick that allowed him to use speed boosts near the cliffs by the elephant in order to propel himself upwards towards the Blightfather path, allowing him to access the rewards of that path without having to spend keys in that direction. That speed boost trick was pretty difficult to replicate, and was eventually patched out of the game with some collision being added when you tried boosting up there. Enter the Dune Buggy, which allowed players to utilize the boost feature of the car in order to climb the rocks and access the top area. Once again, there was a patch which added some collision to the rocks, which made it tough to climb with the car, and the ability to enter this caged area with the Dune Buggy was also removed as well. Finally, the ability to use the 6-arm guide to enter the Blightfather path was discovered and still used to this day, as the game sadly stopped receiving updates by the time this was found. Although with the removal of the third fate reward alluded to earlier, this trick to access the Blightfather path isn't quite as game-changing as it once was. Anyways, that about wraps up this video. If you remember any other glitches that used to be in the game, feel free to share them in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like. Thanks for watching.